Hey guys, Mr. Bowman here. Today's learning objective is in yellow. We are learning to apply the sine rule to find unknown sides and angles. And I've circled sides and angles because that's the key thing what the formula does. It is a tool to help us find or solve problems where we have an unknown side or an unknown angle of a non-right angle triangle. So we're going to start off with just recapping what the formula was. So A divided by sine A is equal to B divided by sine B, which is equal to C divided by sine C. So that's our formula. We're only going to focus on two of them, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a bit. And just a friendly reminder, these only apply to non-right angle triangles. So that's a big thing. Often people apply it to the wrong scenario. So if you do have a look at all of our shapes, look at all the angles there, nothing 90 degrees, which means we are good to go with all of these triangles. So we're going to start off with our first triangle. We'll change pen colors for every question. And I suppose the first step we need to do is we need to label the sides. And we're going to focus on A and B parts of the formula only. So first step, we need to label the angle. So 80 degrees. If that's angle A, the opposite would be little a. And then again, we've got another angle here. That's going to be big B, or angle B, and the opposite, well, that there will be the little b. And I suppose another observation to make, when we're applying the sine rule, we're dealing with 2 angles, and we're dealing with 2 sides. So we'll actually write that down on our list. So we're dealing with 2 angles and 2 sides. And that's important because that will be different for the cosine rule, where the information you're given will be slightly different. So let's get into that green question. So we're going to start off by writing our formula. So we'll call that question 1, A divided by sine big A. Well, that's going to be equal to B divided by sine big B. We then substitute everything based on our labels. So little a is x. So x divided by sine 80. That's going to be equal to B, which is 7, divided by sine 60. Once we've got this, we've just got an algebraic equation with 2 fractions on either side. A friendly reminder, sine 80 and sine 60, they are just numbers. We can move those numbers left and right of the equal sign, just like we would for any other equation. So looking at this, so we can get x by itself if we get rid of the sine 80. So we're going to take that to the other side. So currently we've got divide by sine 80. The opposite of that is going to be times sine 80. I'm not sure why I've written x or why I've written s. So s is going to be equal to 70 divided by sine 60 times the sine 80. So that's how we move that over. And from there, the calculator will do all the work. X will be equal to 7.69, and I've rounded that to not 1 but 2 decimal places. Friendly reminder, you would be expected to include units, but the questions we're looking at today don't have any units. So that was question 1. So on the other side, we're going to switch to question 2. Let's see how that differs. We'll use the orange pen. So question 2, we're going to start off with the same process. We're just going to check, do we have 2 angles? Yes. So that means we're good there. And we do have 2 sides that we're interested in, and that's there. So that does mean we are applying the sine rule. We're then going to start by labeling the sides. So we've got big A down here, which means that's little a. Big B up the top, which means that's going to be little b. We're now going to substitute everything into our equation. So it looks like we're trying to find for an unknown side again. So that means A divided by sine A, that's going to be equal to B divided by sine big B. So that's going to be P divided by sine 32. So those are the A values. That's going to be equal to 21 divided by sine 95. When you do your BidMaths, or when you do your algebra, that's going to be 21 divided by sine 95. We're going to multiply that by sine 32, which is that opposite of divide sine 32 there. And when we put that in our calculator, that gets us to 11.17. And again, we don't have any units, but we would put there, and I've rounded that to 2 decimal places. So at this point, hopefully you've got down the 2 examples we've done. Hopefully you've been doing the working and putting into the calculator to make sure you get the right answers as well. What we're going to do is we're now going to rub out our first one. We're going to move on to the second 2 examples, and they both relate to finding unknown angles. And I'll show you what I mean by that as well. So we'll switch to the green pen. Actually, we'll switch to the blue pen because we haven't used blue. So we're going to have a look. M, pronumeral or a variable, that is now an internal angle, and the same with B down the bottom example. But same deal, we're still dealing with 2 angles. We're still dealing with 2 sides, which means the sine rule does still apply. The algebra is just a little different based on where it sits. So question 3, let's write down our formula. A divided by sine A, that's going to be equal to B divided by sine big B. We then go through our labeling process. So let's call angle M A, which means 8 will be little a, and 75 will be B, which means 10 will be little b. Just a friendly note, if you got the A and the B's the other way around, that's all good. You'll be able to solve for the right answer anyway. So A is 8 divided by sine M. So that means we're going to be trying to solve for that. That's going to be equal to 10 divided by sine 75. We'll then go through our algebra. It's going to be a bit more annoying this time. We're going to move the sine M to the other side. And at the same time, we're going to move the sine 75 to the other side. And they'll both be multiplication. So this side is going to be 8 times sine 75 equals to 10 times sine M. We're then going to move the times 10 to the other side, because our goal is to try to isolate that M. So the algebra is a lot trickier for finding the angles. So that's going to be 8 times sine 75 divided by 10, because that's the opposite of time 10. That's going to be sine M. And our final step, we're going to take the sine over. Opposite of sine is the inverse sine function, which we would have used in previous years. So M is going to be equal to the inverse sine, and we're going to need a big bracket here to make sure our BidMaths works out well. 8 times sine 75, all of that's going to be divided by 10. And when we put that in a calculator, we should get our internal angle, which is 50.6 degrees. And I've got my units this time, and that they are rounded to 1 dp. So hopefully that first example makes sense. The algebra is a lot trickier for this scenario, for when we're finding the angle. So we're going to get rid of the second one on the left here. We're going to start our final question. And I will switch to the yellow pen, the last one for us to use. So same deal, let's start with our formula. So A divided by sine A, that's going to be equal to B divided by sine B. Then we go back to our triangle. We are dealing with 2 angles and 2 sides. So good, I'm happy that I'm using the sine rule. Let's call B, we may as well call that big B this time to avoid confusion, which means the opposite will be little b. 100 can be A, which means 5.1 can be, we've written B, but that's definitely little a. So we can then substitute all of those into our equation. So 5.1 divided by sine 100, that's going to be equal to 3.6 divided by sine little b. We can then go through and solve with our algebra. So same step, let's cross over our trig functions and make them all multiplication. So the left-hand side is going to become 5.1 times sine b, and that will be equal to 3.6 times sine 100. So they're both the opposites of our divisions. We then are going to take the times 5.1 over to the other side. So that means sine little b will be equal to 5.1 times, oh, sorry, not times, sorry, 3.6 times sine 100 divided by 5.1. We can then finish, so b is going to be equal to the inverse sine negative 1, 3.6 times sine 100, and that there is going to be divided by 5.1. And that means we'll be able to figure out what b is, which comes to 44.0 degrees if we round that to 1 decimal place. So hopefully you found this video useful. What we did is we learned how to apply the sine rule to find unknown sides at angles of given non-right angle triangles. Hopefully you got down all 4 examples. Hopefully you're checking that you're able to get each answer on your calculator. If you've done that, let's get into heaps of practice.